were gladiators, and if you went to the Colosseum, there was a chance that you would die, and you knew that. And if you were fighting the lions, well then why shouldn't you be pawed and mauled? I did not think I was being paid for risk. I naively assumed that I was being paid for my skills.
Stewart himself had a frightening crash at Francorchamps in Belgium, where he was trapped in the car, soaked in petrol and with a broken collarbone. He lived to tell the tale. Many others were not so lucky. Was it fate? Whatever the reason, Jackie had a remarkable run.
I never drew blood from my body as a racing driver. In my entire professional career, or even amateur career as a racing driver, I consider I was very well looked after from above. I drove for the best teams, therefore the best prepared vehicles mechanically. Therefore I didn't have the failures that some people would have engineeringly. And I think that I drove fairly conservatively.
But maybe the fastest conservative ever. One of his greatest drives came amid appalling conditions in the 1968 German Grand Prix, when he won by a record margin of over 4 minutes.
I won by a big margin. The first question I asked when I came in, is everybody all right? There were 16 drivers or 18 drivers in those days. And one was dying every month. I mean, it was almost like family. It was just crazy.
Jackie didn't want to go out. He said the conditions are too bad. And really the conditions were too bad. But the race was going to go ahead, and for the first and last time, I hope, in my involvement with motor racing, I had to make him drive the car. The Germans called him, at the prize given that night, called him the Rainmaster.
Ken Tyrrell was the man who guided Stewart's magnificent career. But racing drivers are a strange breed. For example, Stewart drove at breakneck speeds, but with ice in his veins. He could see someone putting up an umbrella in the crowd, even at nearly 200 miles an hour.
Racing drivers are peculiar people. Racing drivers are not normal people. There is no doubt. They are people who are able to control things that most other folks aren't. Seldom are any good racing drivers brave. I mean, I think a brave man is usually a stupid man, with the downsides not considered. It's spontaneous. That's sometimes bravery. I think courage is different. Courage is controlled fear. When you drive a Grand Prix racing car, Michael Schumacher today is a very calculated young man. However, take him on a day off and put him on a circuit with 2 or 3 people in a road car driving round, he'll have that thing round its ear at angles that you wouldn't believe, or slide and oversteer and understeer, and he'll always bring it back. And to other people, it seems absolutely stupid. To him, he's giving himself the greatest amount of pleasure by taking that car to limits that it was never designed to go to, knowing within himself that he's got the ability to bring it back. Knowing, categorically. There's a zest for life. It's very intoxicating. It's an adrenaline rush. It's a terrific feeling. I've still got it. I test drive, and every now and again I go out and I take one to the absolute limit of its ability. It's fantastic. It's just like a therapy to me.
In 1969, Jackie Stewart won the first of his 3 world titles in a car he loved to drive, the Matra MS-80. That season, he reeled off 6 Grand Prix victories. He'd arrived at his own sporting summit, and Ken Tyrrell knew he was in the company of greatness.
His ability to control a race from the front, or if not from the front, he would lap so consistently behind perhaps the leader, who might be quicker on every 4th lap or something, but could not manage it consistently, that he would wear him down. You know, he would niggle away, and eventually he'd get by through sheer consistency.
I'd come up the ladder of success with him, and to actually, for Jackie to achieve what he did, and that day, and we're looking into his eyes, and he looked into mine, and, oh, I've done it, you know. I was so happy, and I have a lot of photographs to show it. But I think I was terribly proud of him.
To think that he couldn't be world champion once you saw him driving, even very early on in his career, he was obviously a potential world champion.
Jackie Stewart is in motor racing's Hall of Fame. A generation on, and today's world champion, Michael Schumacher, hopes that one day he too will be mentioned in the same breath as the likes of Fangio, Clark, Lauda, Prost and Senna. Damon Hill, narrowly beaten for the title in 1994, also strives for greatness, but it's an elusive commodity.
To win a world championship, I don't think it's very difficult, actually.
Well, he would say that because he's got 3 world championships, hasn't he?
If you get a good team and you get good mechanics and you get a designer and a fast car, it's not too difficult to win a world championship. But to win it more than once and more than that is more difficult, because you've really got to deliver more than just occasionally. You've got to do it with regularity. And I think that's where the mind plays the part. I never found it difficult to drive a racing car. It was the easiest thing I ever did in my life. But to be able to repeat that and to be able to deliver at the very end a performance that was not in competition with any other driver, they didn't exist for me. The biggest competition for me was me, to eliminate the mistakes, because we all make them, but the very good ones don't allow the observer to recognize that mistakes are being made.
But drivers definitely do make mistakes, as Schumacher found out on the way to the title. He was black flagged in the British Grand Prix, and on his return, Ken Tyrrell just couldn't resist the joke.
While you were driving round without your helmet on, using the telephone, Luciano Benetton and Flavio Briatore were talking to me, telling me to black flag you to make sure that when you're out on the track, you wear your helmet.
Ah, okay, it's fine. You forgot something. I lost the safety.
The top man is always a target. Today it's Schumacher. Back in '71, it was Stewart.
Very impressed, I was. Very quick.
Jackie's win at Monaco was one of 6 victories that year in the legendary Tyrrell 003. The same car went on to win 2 more Grand Prix the following season, and it was later presented as a gift to Jackie Stewart. Indeed, Monte Carlo was one of Jackie's favourite tracks. He won 3 Grand Prix round the sharp bends and narrow streets of the Principality.
And he gave a couple of seconds. Here he comes, the checkered flag's ready, and Jackie Stewart wins the Monaco Grand Prix for Ken Tyrrell.
If you've never walked into the Hotel de Paris in Monte Carlo after having won the Grand Prix, still in your racing overalls, carrying a laurel wreath, and the cocktail bar in the lobby, which is crammed with people who have come only for that one reason for that weekend, they stop, stare, and then start to applaud. You would be a fool not to be touched by that kind of reaction. Many of them, the rich and the famous. In the early days, physical fitness didn't seem to play a very important part. In fact, I had a duodenal ulcer that hemorrhaged in 1972. I suddenly became vulnerable physically, and I recognized that I had to put myself into good condition. From that point on, I really worked at physical conditioning, and really have never given up since, because in those days, when you're quite young, it's very easy to be fit. You know, the body responds immediately to that little program. And I always did some exercise and did some things, but never, I don't think, as dedicated as today's Grand Prix drivers are to conditioning, or for that matter, as I am today, because I consider the physical aspect of my life and my future to be as important as my mental conditioning.
In 1973, in what was to be his farewell season, Jackie Stewart won at Monaco again, and he was crowned champion for a 3rd time. In one of his last races, he produced perhaps his greatest drive ever. People still talk about the way he overcame all sorts of problems to storm through from 19th to finish 4th in Italy. But thoughts of retirement were beginning to filter into his mind, and at the age of 34, they would not go away, despite his continuing success.
Philip Martin.
Ronnie Peterson. Danny Hall.
Yeah. Betty Hill.
He and Helen had built a treasure trove of memories. They'd made so many friends, and lost a few too.
I'll tell you, that was when I...
Francois Sever was Stewart's teammate, a young man with a real zest for life. He died in practice at Watkins Glen in the USA. Tyrrell withdrew, and Jackie never raced again.
I was just so tired, and so I was getting more aggravation than I was getting satisfaction. And it wasn't a 5-minute wonder. It was the best decision I ever made in my life, because it wasn't taking the first stab of pain or fatigue. It was taken after a long, prolonged view of where I was going, what I was doing. And in the end, there was even a degree of futility about the whole syndrome of driving round in circles trying to prove yourself better than the next man, faster, or whatever. It just seemed to me, hey, what are you doing?
You'll still see Jackie Stewart around, maybe working in TV or helping his son's team, Paul Stewart Racing. It's such a glamorous sport, but never ever believed that anyone could do it.
There are hundreds of millions of people in the world have licenses to drive. Several millions, for sure, have competition licenses. Quite a few thousand make a living out of it. A few hundred make a good living out of it and do it professionally. Out of those hundreds of millions that we spoke of at the beginning, 26 or 28 ever become a Grand Prix driver in any one year. So they are all gifts from God for those extraordinary people. Out of those 26, at any one time, generally, there's only 6 that are any good. And at any one time, there's only 3 that are extraordinary. And at any one time, generally, there's only 1 genius.
Were you a genius?
In my time, in my period, I was the one who was the one to beat. And I won more races than anybody else at that time, or more championships, and therefore I was maybe that one person for that period. And in history it will be a speck. But Jim Clark was, and so was Niki Lauda, and so was Alan Prost, and Ayrton Senna, and Sterling Moss, and Fangio, and Nuvolari, and there's all these names that have featured, and they were the best of their time. That's all you can be, and you strive for that.
Stewart is keen to pass on his wisdom. For his safety campaign alone, today's drivers owe him a debt of gratitude. But what can he teach new talents like David Coulthard?
Trying to make you a more complete driver, what you should be thinking about, not just barreling into a corner and gathering it all together once you arrive at the apex. Allowing yourself the time to actually plan the corners correctly, how to think more clearly during a race. And there's nothing like using someone else's experience rather than having to try and learn by your own mistakes. And as I say, out of the car has helped me a great deal with how to deal with the press, for instance, how to deal with sponsors, and generally just how to be more advanced, if you like, for my years, because I'm only 23.
At his peak in the late 60s and early 70s, Jackie Stewart was the main man. The fans worshipped him, but nothing could change his mother's opinion of motor racing.
She would never admit it, that she knew that I was a racing driver. And when I retired from racing, by then she was living in a nursing home. And I went to tell her, I thought it would be nice to go up myself to tell her. And I said, well, Mum, just would like you to know that I've decided I'm not going to drive racing cars anymore. And she just burst out into a big laugh. And that was it. And all she said was, you're well out of it.
It was over 2 decades ago that Jackie Stewart retired, but he's still a celebrity. In motor racing circles, he's revered as one of the sport's legends. These days, Jackie Stewart rarely has to drive anything more challenging than the family car. His splendid home in Switzerland continues to be his base for a thriving business career. The boys have grown up proud of a father whose achievements are an inspiration for today's dyslexic children.
That was a bit of luck.
I didn't know, you could go that far in life when you can barely read or barely write. It really gave me the courage to speak out, and I really honor him a lot.
I think for someone like him to do what he has done and do the best he can, I think it's as good, if not better, than all the great leaders, because I think just bringing out the best in yourself is just the most important thing.